Spectre is the newest James Bond film, with Daniel Craig returning as Bond and Sam Mendes returning as the director, hot off the heels of my favorite Bond film ever, Skyfall. What did I think of Spectre? Well, it was a really good Bond movie. Actually, I'd say it was great. It was a great Bond film. But I'm going to elaborate a little bit on that. And just to let you know, this is going to be a spoiler-free review. If you want to get into spoilers, check out my podcast, Blah Blah Podcast. My friends and I ripped the hell out of this movie. Not in a bad way. I mean, we spoiled the entire thing while discussing what we liked and what we didn't like. Anyway, Spectre is the fourth and somewhat seemingly final film for Daniel Craig as James Bond. It starts out in an amazing way, where Bond is in Mexico City celebrating the Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. And the camera just follows them in a long shot, similar to Birdman, if any of you guys have seen that, and follows them into a hotel room where Bond seemingly kisses the girl and says, "Hey, I'll be right back." So it's revealed why Bond's really there. He's tailing someone that he wants to kill. Bond overhears what this person is saying to his associates. He puts two and two together because he's a smart guy, and realizes that this guy is more than meets the eye. So after a lot of gunfire and explosions, Bond finds himself going upside down and swirly, whirly, whirly in a helicopter with this guy he's trying to kill. So one thing leads to another, and Bond discovers the plot of the film. That there is this secret organization called Spectre, who are pretty much like the Illuminati, and they've been pulling the strings in Bond's life for the past 3, and now 4 films. They were responsible for the events of Casino Royale, they were responsible for the events of Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, and now Spectre, this movie. So Spectre really feels like kind of like 2 Bond films in one. The earlier Daniel Craig James Bond films had a very grittiness, like realistic, like bare bones, white knuckle, fist face attitude. And then the earlier Bond movies of like decades ago, like the Roger Moore ones and the not the Timothy Dalton ones, but mainly the Roger Moore ones, they were a little bit more campy and whatnot, and there are some hints of that in Spectre, and some of it works really well. Like there's a specific scene where after a giant explosion, Bond falls through a building and lands on a couch, just like, and he's kind of sitting there like, oh, thanks. And there's some like hints of campiness comedy throughout Spectre, and some works really well, but it kind of made me think like this kind of feels like 2 Bond ideas in one. Like the writer's room, like the writer's room table was divided down the middle. You had one team of people saying, hey, we should go back to the old campy Bond films where Bond was seemingly indestructible and extremely intelligent. And another side of the writer's room is just like, no, we need to stick true to the grittiness and dark nature of the previous Daniel Craig Bond movies. So I feel like they kind of met in the middle. And that's not a bad thing. This is a really great Bond film. It just does not reach the height of Skyfall. As I said earlier, I loved Skyfall. That is my favorite Bond film ever. That movie was outstanding. And this is made by the same director, so I thought I would get the same thing, and I kind of didn't. So there were a few things about Spectre that didn't really mesh with me, which was, first, the opening theme song. The opening theme songs / intros for Bond films are just as important as anything else in a James Bond film. They set the mood, the tone, all that good stuff, and they're really fun to watch. I mean, the Skyfall theme, even the Quantum of Solace theme, and especially the Casino Royale theme were great. But this one by Sam Smith called The Writings on the Wall was, I wasn't a fan at all. I mean, there was nothing catchy about it. There was no build-up, nothing like that, none of that wow factor. I mean, after I heard the Skyfall theme by Adele, that was stuck in my head for weeks. This really isn't. So the Sam Smith opening song wasn't too great. Another thing that Spectre fell short with, even though it's length related, was the movie's length. This was the longest Bond film ever made, and I really feel at least a half hour could have been cut out. There are some scenes that just seem to drag and really don't contribute to the rest of the story. You really feel the nearly 3-hour mark. And probably my biggest gripe about Spectre is its villain. Now, James Bond villains are just as important as Bond himself, and the Bond girls. And Spectre's villain, who is the head of Spectre, is played by renowned actor Christoph Waltz. Christoph Waltz is a man who just exudes charisma and confidence. He is such a cool actor to watch. Like if you watch him in Django, or he was in Horrible Bosses 2, which really wasn't even a good movie, but he was great in it. When you can, just check out Christoph Waltz's filmography. He's a great actor. So going into Spectre, I was like, wow, Christoph Waltz is going to be a James Bond villain? That's awesome. This is the role he was born to play. But he never really reached the heights that I thought he would. First of all, he wasn't really in the film that much. He didn't really bring anything new to the table that other past Bond villains did. And lastly, his motive for going after Bond and basically screwing up his whole life for these past movies really wasn't valid. Now, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but his reasons for screwing up Bond's life for so many years really isn't like something that's warranted for the amount of time that he screwed with Bond. I almost expected Bond to just say, get over it. But all in all, Waltz served his purpose, and he was a good Bond villain. Not the best. I mean, Javier Bardem's Silva from Skyfall still is my favorite. So what worked with Spectre? Well, the action was great. Like I said, the very explosive opening in Mexico City. There was a great car chase halfway through. And there was a great bare-knuckle brawl on a train that echoed From Russia with Love. That was between Daniel Craig and Dave Bautista, of all people. Now, if you're a WWE fan, you'll know Batista as the wrestler Batista, who wrestled for, I think, maybe 5-6 years in the WWE. And he just made his big screen debut last year with Guardians of the Galaxy as Drax the Destroyer. He was really good in that film as well. Now, Batista is back on the big screen as Mr. Hinx, the big brooding monster of a man who is out for Bond's blood. It's weird how the internet credits him as Mr. Hinx when I don't really remember them even saying his name, Spectre. Batista doesn't say a single word in Spectre, and yet he just exudes so much confidence. He is a lot of fun to watch, and the fight on the train that he has with Bond is probably my favorite scene in the entire movie. And honestly, for my days of watching WWE religiously back in high school, I never thought that Batista would be this big of a movie star, but it's a pleasant surprise. Ralph Fiennes returns as M, and he just deals with the B-plot of Spectre, and he just seems mad the entire film. And Ben Whishaw returns as Q, who was introduced in Skyfall, and in Skyfall, he seemed to be like a very suave, like confident type of gadget maker, you know, the guy who gives Bond all the gadgets. But in Spectre, he seems very wimpy, for lack of a better term. There's so many parts in Spectre where Bond kind of forces him to do something, and Q's just like, okay, yeah, I'll do it, Mr. Bond, just please don't hurt me. That kind of thing. And Naomi Harris comes back as Moneypenny, Bond's cool, hot secretary who keeps hitting on him. And she's, there. She deals with the B-plot as well, just like M does. And this movie's titular Bond girl is Leah Sedox. I'm terrible at pronouncing names. She plays Madeline, who was introduced really late into the film, but still plays the Bond girl very well. Spectre does a really good job at tying everything together, too. I heard that Daniel Craig is contracted for a 5th movie, but I kind of hope they renegotiate it because the way Spectre ends really seals the deal on the Daniel Craig Bond arc. I mean, everything comes full circle. They allude to every other Daniel Craig Bond movie there is. Everything seems to be tied up, and he rides off into the sunset at the end of the movie. So, in my opinion, Spectre was great. It didn't reach the heights that Skyfall set, but it was a way better film than Quantum of Solace. Just a tad below Casino Royale. Spectre was really good, great action scenes, Daniel Craig at his finest, kind of. Good story about, a whole Illuminati type thing. That was done really well. But it was a little too long, pretty drawn out. Christoph Waltz's character was pretty underdeveloped. I mean, his motivation for doing what he does really didn't seem that big in the grand scheme of things. But it really encapsulated the Daniel Craig arc, tied everything into a little bow, and just knotted it perfectly at the end. So I say clear your schedule and go see Spectre because you're going to need a lot of time. Hey guys, thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it. Please follow me on Twitter at jgreen89. That's J-A-Y, green, like the color, 89. And while you're at it, follow my podcast, Blah Blah Pod 1, B-L-A-H Pod 1. We're also on iTunes, Blah Blah Podcast. And like I said, check out our review of Spectre. It's completely spoiler-filled. So please see Spectre first and then check out what we have to say about it. And listen to the other episodes. They're a lot of fun. And I'll see you all next week. I'm not really sure what I'm going to review. I looked at the schedule, and it doesn't seem to be a lot coming out. I'll probably pick something that's been out for a while. Or maybe a video game. Fallout's coming tomorrow. I don't know. Anyway, subscribe. Follow my podcast. Follow me on Twitter. See you next time.